So do we trust God? Do you really trust God? I mean, do you trust him with everything? I ask myself that question on a regular basis. Do I really trust God? Because God wants us to trust him completely. That's what faith is. It's complete trust in God. He wants us to know that he will provide for us. In fact, Abraham called him Jehovah Jireh, which is the Lord provides. He did that when God had told him to take and sacrifice his son. And as he's preparing to sacrifice his son Isaac, God provided a ram in the thicket as a substitutionary sacrifice. The God who provides. Do I really trust God? Do we even give God the opportunity to provide, or do we decide we better figure out how to do it on our own? I mean, I'm asking for a friend. When God delivered the Israelites out of Egypt, He brought them out of slavery. He brought them out of the nation where they were living, where they had been for over 400 years. They were pretty established there. God brought them out of there, but he still had to get Egypt out of them. He needed to get them so they learned to really trust him. No matter what, to trust him. Because he wanted to use them to reveal his character to the rest of the nations. He wanted to use Israel. They were to be a priest nation, a nation of priests, representing God to the people and the people to God. He had plans for them, but first they had to learn who he was, and that he was Jehovah Jireh. He was the God who provides. He was the God that they could trust no matter where they were, no matter what they were going through. I can only imagine the Israelites coming to the edge of the Red Sea, the Egyptian army coming in behind them, that God separating them, light on the Israelite side, darkness on the Egyptian side. As wind blew throughout the night, the Red Sea parted. The Israelites walk across on dry ground. They get to the other side, and the waters come in and drowned out Pharaoh's army. We can trust that God. But on that other side of the Red Sea, they're in the desert. And it's hot. And it's dry. And 3 days with nothing to drink, your tongue starts to kind of stick to the roof of your mouth. Your throat gets parched. Your lips begin to crack. And they begin to grumble. And then they found water. But they couldn't even drink it. It says it was bitter. It was unfit to drink. And they grumble against Moses. And Moses goes to God and says, God, what am I supposed to do? And God says, I want you to take a piece of wood, take a stick, take a tree, different trees, and throw it into that well. And the water became fit to drink. And then we're told in Exodus 15, beginning in verse 25, there the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. He said, if you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. So God provided water for them in the desert. He made the water good. But they did all that grumbling. And check out right after that, right after this, in verse 27, right after what I just read, then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. If they'd only trusted God, he brought them, right in that next verse, he brought them to 12 springs and 70 palm trees and an oasis in the desert. If they had trusted God, they could have saved all that grumbling. He knew where he was taking them. They could trust him to take them where they would have what they needed. But they grumbled and came to bitter water. Now God took care of that water and says, you can trust me, but let me show you what I've got for you. Sometimes what we see and what we complain about is not all God has for us. God provides us what we need when we need it. As the saying goes, God is rarely early. He's never late. He's always on time. Not on our time, on his time. Maybe we don't have what we want because God has something better for us around the corner. Maybe the time is not yet. Maybe God's trying to teach us patience and that we can trust him. Maybe he wants us to know that he's there for us even when we feel like he's missing in action. Well, the Israelites hung out there, the 12 springs, one for each tribe, the 70 palm trees. They're chilling out in the oasis, and then God tells them to move on, and they're on their way to Sinai, Mount Sinai, where they're going to have a meeting with God. And the people begin to grumble against Moses and Aaron again. Exodus 16:3, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, there we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Now, it is easy for us to point fingers at the Israelites now, right? Oh, you came across the Red Sea. God provided water for you. God has put you around these 12 springs. But why don't you trust him? But, can you see those pictures there? Goshen in Egypt was prime farmland. I mean, the Nile River flooded it, and it has great topsoil. And they had all kinds of crops. They had all kinds of food there. I mean, it was good living right there. And they have come out of that, and they're in the desert where there's a few little tufts of grass that may be greenish brown, and a few little shrubs around. But there's not much at all out there. There's no water. There's none of these things. So they're saying, why did you bring us? This isn't a promotion. You brought us out of this green, lush garden out into the middle of the desert where there is nothing. We may have been working as slaves, making bricks and building pyramids, but we had all the food we wanted. We were comfortable there. And now we don't even have enough water or food for the day. What have you brought us into? But remember, God has them in a training camp. He's showing them, he's teaching them, he's revealing to them that he is trustworthy and that he will provide for them. Well, God heard their grumbling, and he sent quail into the camp, and the people were able to gather up these quail so they had meat to eat. And in the morning, as the dew dried up, there was little flakes on the ground. And they said, what is it? Which translates manna. When we say manna, manna actually means, what is it? I mean, these flakes, and they're trying to figure out, they'd never seen this kind of food before. but it was God's provision for them. It had nutritional value for them for the next 40 years as they wandered around in the wilderness, as they wandered around in the desert. God gave them manna each day to eat. He was showing them, I will provide. I'm Jehovah Jireh. I will provide for you. You can trust me. It's kind of like, give us this day our daily bread. Do we trust God that much? Just give me enough for today. I know you'll take care of tomorrow. Because that's what he told them. Just gather up enough manna for today. It'll be here tomorrow. I'll provide tomorrow. But today, you just get what you need for. Can you imagine that? You only have enough food in the house for today. And you just got to trust. Only have enough toilet paper in the house for today. And you trust that God's going to make sure you've got enough for tomorrow. Do we trust God? Well, the Israelites were supposed to just gather enough for today. Those that gathered much had just enough. Those who gathered little had just enough. But some of them decided, I don't know if there's going to be anything tomorrow. We are out here in the wilderness and there's nothing else to eat. So they gathered a little extra and they held it back. And when they got up in the morning, it was filled with maggots and it was rotten. And God says, I told you, you don't need to hoard it. You have to trust me to provide you enough for today. Give us this day our daily bread. No, not give us this week, not give us this month, not give us this year. Give us this day our daily bread. Man, it is hard to trust God like that. And I don't think it's hard because we don't think he's trustworthy, but I think it's hard because we want to be in control. Just enough for today? But God's trying to break the Israelites of depending on themselves. He's trying to reveal to them that you can trust me to provide. We don't need to try to hang on to extra. We don't need to grab hold of or accumulate an abundance while others lack. God will provide. Do you know there is enough food produced on this planet? The world farmers produce enough food to feed 1.5 times the number of people on this world. We do not have a food problem. We got a people problem. We got a politics problem. We have a distribution problem. We have some people that are just throwing things away, and we have other people in need. It's not because it's not there. It's because we're hoarding it for ourselves and not caring for others. God's trying to teach Israel, and he tries to teach us. We don't need to hoard. We can trust him. You don't have to go to the store and buy every roll of toilet paper there. I mean, they're doing it again. Hopefully you don't have rooms full, I hope. We don't have to hoard things, and people do that with all kinds of things. We can trust God. Jehovah Jireh, our provider. And then, in the midst of that, he also said, oh, by the way, on the Sabbath, there won't be any manna out there that day. Don't go out and try to collect it. Just gather twice as much the day before, and you'll be good. It won't rot. Well, some people got up that morning, they're out there looking for it. I told you. The Sabbath, it's a day for you to rest. Maybe we need to hear that. Maybe Mark needs to hear this anyway. It's a day for you to rest. You have to trust me enough to not work this day and know there's still enough. You don't have to keep going and going and going and going. Take a break and know that I will provide. I wonder how many years it took for some of the Israelites to not have to go to the flap of the tent and look out and wonder if there was going to be manna there that day. Did he do it again? Did he do it again? Did he do? How long did it take before they said, oh yeah, it'll be there? We can trust God. He provides. They still had to go out and gather it, but God provided it. All of that sets us up for our passage in Mark this morning. Mark chapter 6, beginning in verse 30. Mark 6:30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. And this is after he had all sent them out to teach and preach and do miracles and heal people. And if the town didn't accept them, they were to kick their dust off their feet. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. They said, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have, he asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. Now, Jesus and his disciples were tired. I mean, they've been teaching and preaching and healing, and people were just coming and coming and coming and demanding their attention. They had been running on adrenaline, but after a while that catches up to you, and they are tired and hungry. And Jesus says, come with me, by yourselves, to a quiet place and get some rest. But the crowds followed. They couldn't get a break. They landed and the crowds are right there again, demanding of them, wanting their time, wanting their attention. And so much for a quiet, solitary place where they could get rest. Jesus could have run them off. Hey, I'm on vacation. Hey, we're off right now. Leave us alone. Come back tomorrow. But compassion doesn't take a break. Compassion doesn't go on vacation. It says they were like sheep without a shepherd. That's Old Testament talk there. The Old Testament talks about the shepherds being the religious leaders and the political leaders were to be shepherds for the people. They were to look out for them. They were to care for them. But over and over it talks about they weren't good shepherds. They were grabbing stuff for themselves instead of taking care of the people. And the people were like sheep without a shepherd. And the Old Testament prophets over and over spoke of this shepherd that was going to come who would take care of God's people. Jesus is our shepherd. He is the good shepherd. We can trust him to provide us with everything we need. So instead of pushing the people off and says, come back tomorrow, Jesus had compassion on them, and he taught them, and he cared for them. And then as it's growing late, the disciples say, hey, Jesus, you need to send these people away. And they say, so they can buy for themselves something to eat. Hey, send them away so they can take care of themselves. Let them fend for themselves. We'll take care of us. But send them off to take care of themselves. Then maybe we can get some of that quiet time you had talked about. And there is times when we need quiet time with Jesus. But if we spend all of our time in prayer and reading Scripture and solitary, just trying to draw closer to God, quiet time with Jesus, it's good. But if we never use our time to go out and care for others, we're not really imitating Jesus, are we? Jesus cared about the people. We're not called to build walls. We're called to build bridges. There's going to be time for rest, but right now, these people are in need. There's opportunity, and Jesus is not going to ignore the opportunity. He answered, you give them something to eat. No, the disciples said, you send them so they can take care of themselves. And Jesus says, no, you give them something to eat. You feed them. Now, I imagine the disciples didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you crazy, Jesus? I mean, we've seen a lot of things, but you want us to feed all these people? It would take a half a year's wages to feed them all. Something I had never noticed before. I noticed as I was reading and studying and preparing for this, it says, are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? It does not say we don't have enough money to buy it. Maybe they had that much in their treasury. I mean, there's 12 of them there. And they had some women come along, and they had finance, and they had donations. They might have had enough money. I don't know. Are we to spend that much money on bread and give it to them? This is us. This is my retirement plan. And I'm supposed to take and buy bread to take care of them, to feed these people? What if there's not enough? What if donations stop coming in? What if the food runs out? What if we don't have enough for us? What if? And Jesus says, you feed them. You feed them. Sometimes we're praying, God, don't you care about these people? God, why don't you take care of the widows and orphans? God, why don't you take care of these homeless people? God, why don't you take care of this person? God, why don't you take care of these children at Christmas? And he says, I am. That's what I've got you here for. You take care of them. That's how I'm taking care of them. By you taking care of them. Jesus invites us to join him in caring for people and creation. We want him to flash something down from heaven. Boom, there it is. And he said, no. You remember last month? You got to the end of the month and you said, man, I got more money than I thought at the end of the month. Yeah, that money, I gave that to you so you could use it over here. Oh, you know that extra time you've got on Saturday you didn't think you were going to have? Oh, yeah, I arranged that so you could go and spend time with this person here. See, God wants to use, you feed them, he told the disciples. And Jesus had the disciples do an inventory. Well, what do you have? You don't want to go spend the money. What do you have? They checked it out. 5 loaves, 2 fish. John tells us it was a boy's lunch. One boy, out of all those people, had a mother who planned enough to make sure he had lunch when he got out there. I guess nobody else did. But one lunch isn't much. Not when you got 5,000 men and then you've got all the women and children as well. But Jesus took those 5 loaves. We think the boy willingly gave it and Andrew didn't just take it from him. he took the 5 loaves, 2 fish, and he had the people sit in groups, and it says here in Mark, on green grass. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. You see the picture Mark's given us here? The good shepherd taking care of his sheep. Taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided 2 fish among them all. Jesus blessed and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to his disciples to distribute. He blessed and broke. He blessed and broke the disciples as well and sent them to share the good news. He blesses and breaks us and sends us out to distribute his blessings to the people around us. He doesn't break us like you break a toy that can't be fixed. He breaks us like you break a horse, that you break its self-centeredness so that it submits to the master willingly. That's what he does. He blesses us and breaks us of our self-centeredness so we're willing to go out and love God and love people and be a blessing to the people around us. That he sends us to feed his sheep. 5,000 men plus women and children ate until they were satisfied, and there were 12 basketfuls of food left over at the end, one for each disciple. A take home, carry out. They had plenty. Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. God let the disciples be a part of what he was doing, and they actually did the feeding. He said, you feed them, and they did. They took what Jesus blessed and broke, and distributed to the people. The boy might not have had much lunch, but it turned out to be a lot, enough, an abundance when it was put into the hands of Jesus. If we have an attitude of abundance instead of scarcity and are willing to give willingly to Jesus, he will bless it and use it to do way more than we could ever even begin to imagine. Instead, our tendency is to grumble and complain because we don't have enough, kind of like the Israelites. We hoard and hang on to what comes our way because we're afraid there may not be enough for tomorrow. Maybe we can't trust God. Maybe he won't provide. But Jesus blesses and breaks and multiplies and uses us to distribute his blessings. I wonder, as the disciples are taking the bread and the fish out, and they keep going and coming back and say, how many were there? And they keep going and coming. But as they're giving it out, I wonder if I ought to stick a little in my pocket just in case the miracle stops. Will there be enough for me when I get done? But they just kept giving out and giving out and giving out and giving out. And when they got all done, 12 basketfuls. And these are big baskets. 12 basketfuls left over. They had to trust that Jesus would provide. Jesus did all the multiplying. The disciples just had to distribute and trust him. Jesus took bread. He gave thanks and he broke it. He says, it gave it to them saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. He did the same actions as he did when he multiplied the bread and fed the 5,000. He blessed it and broke it. And he says, take this bread, his body, one body, to join us together in unity as followers of Jesus, so that the world will know us by our love for each other. This bread is bread, but it is a whole lot more. It's a reminder that Jesus died for us, but it's more. It's a sacrament. It's an outward sign of God's inward grace. It's an outward indicator of what's going on inside of us. It's a reminder of our need for God to nourish our souls. It's a physical reminder that we need Jesus each and every day. It's a reminder that Jesus is our provider. It's a physical means of receiving the gift of God through the body of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit. Give us this day our daily bread, to remind us that as we receive love, grace, and provision from Jesus, we are also supposed to distribute that to the people we encounter. And we don't have to worry about lack, because we worship Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. He is not a God of scarcity, but a God of abundance.